Hi, I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Chris.
And we're from Love My Brit. And we're here today to talk about our visa journey.
Yeah.
From start to finish.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Well over a year ago, we decided when closing the distance that it would be better for us to move to the UK versus you moving to the US because he was a university graduate with less than 5 years work experience in your career path, which would have meant it would have been harder for him to find employment in the US when they're expecting a minimum of 5 years work history for most job applications. So,
yeah. And especially with a degree from a foreign country as well, just added extra complications.
Yeah. So we chose not to go with any of the American visas, the K1 or the CR1 for us if we chose to get married there. But we opted not to go for US visas and looked into the UK visa process. We decided to go with the UK fiancé visa route so we could legally marry in the UK and then start our lives there together. We'd have a UK wedding.
Yep. And then go back to the US when we could and have a
US
celebration, wedding celebration in front of American friends and family.
So we started prepping for that, downloaded some visas that we could practice with online, and started pulling in proof that we were planning a wedding and all of our other evidence as time was going on. And then we decided one day, as the new year was approaching, that maybe it wasn't really the right visa option for us. We had to get this house, an unfurnished accommodation, and buy all of our own furniture because it needed to be pet friendly. And that wasn't, I love you, it wasn't very easy to find in Lancaster. So we felt like all of the odds were stacked up against us and was making this really difficult. So we found this place, which was really great. You did a great job finding it and furnished it with our own money, but that also meant we had to pay for our wedding and for our visas on our own, and that's not cheap.
Right, and especially when with the fiancé visa, we would have paid for one visa,
right,
and then 6 months later, second visa, almost immediately.
Right, so we just felt that for us, what meant the most was just being together. And so we decided that you were going to come to the United States and we were going to get married while he was visiting on the ESTA visa waiver program through the US, because we had spoken to an immigration lawyer client of mine through the dog training world, and also had seen videos that lawyers have made on YouTube describing the fact that you can possibly do this if your intent isn't to stay in the US, and that was ours. Yeah. We were coming to the US to see me for Christmas, and we were going to randomly get married in there, and then he would go back home. So that's why it worked for us. We'll link the video here for the lawyer video that we watched, and that was so beneficial. It did really calm our nerves, especially talking to my immigration lawyer clients as well, because she had a lot of really great insight. Yeah. So yeah, we got married on New Year's Eve. That was really great. We had a couple of my friends and family there for witnesses. The most in attendance were grandparents on my side, because I knew that they wouldn't be able to come to the UK. When we did get married in the US, we did make a YouTube video that we shared with our friends and family, stating that although we were going to quickly marry in the US, that it didn't take away from this big elaborate wedding we've been planning for so long.
For all intents and purposes, that UK wedding was still the wedding that we were emotionally invested in. Yeah. And we didn't want anyone who we were invited to that wedding to feel that
they were less important and didn't want to attend, really. We wanted to convey that this wedding that we had been planning in the UK was still going to happen. It still meant something to us, but we just needed to get this visa wedding out of the way so that it could make the process for us to be together easier. And so we did that, and it was well received amongst
everyone
our friends and family.
Understood the reasons.
Yeah. which made such a relief on our part, because it was very stressful thinking that people could be upset by this.
Yeah.
So we had our wedding on New Year's Eve. It was great. Had some friends there and my grandparents there. And then you went back home, and that's when we started to begin our visa process. And we cut out the UK fiancé visa and went straight for spouse, because we're married now. I changed my name as quickly as I could in the US, so I didn't have to apply for my visa in my maiden name. So the first thing you have to do in the US is change your name at the Social Security office. And then from there, you can change everything else. Your driver's license, your passport, your bank accounts. But the Social Security office has to be done first. So I changed all of that. And by the time I had my new passport in my hand and my new Social Security card with my new surname on there, is when we felt like we were ready to start preparing for this spouse visa. So flash forward to February, a month and a half later, Valentine's Day is coming up, and this is yet again another Valentine's Day that we've spent apart. We've never had a Valentine's Day together. Yeah, and we decided, why not start the visa process? So we started our online application. We weren't ready to pay for it and hit that submit button, but we started filling in all of the information.
Right.
We still had a couple of documents that were really important to collect.
Yeah.
And when we were ready, I think it was about 10 days later, we paid for the online application and submitted that. And I had a very, very long, stressful wait.
Yes.
Paid for priority, because the quicker we could have a decision, the more relief it would put on us, so that we could just have this done and over with. But I stressed out really bad during this time. And I was away from home, pet sitting, doing my thing. And I think being away from my friends and my family, because I was busy with my work, kind of amplified that anxiety, because I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it but you.
Who was also waiting. We were both in this big waiting boat together.
Right. And so I would try and go online and research, how do you find out if your visa is refused or accepted? What are the things to watch for? Videos on people who have received successful applications and what it was like, because that's all I had to look forward to. So it was just a bit of a waiting game. Anything that we did get from the UKVI was pretty generic.
It was kind of a, thank you, we've received your application. We've now begun to look at your application. Nothing that ever hinted at whether it was going well or not, and that's kind of the same for everyone.
Well, the first email I got that scared me was, we received your online application. This was after I submitted all of my documents. So I was like, what? You just got my online application? I saw on UPS tracking that my documents have already made it to you. So it kind of freaked me out. But then I was like, it's got to be just something that they just send. So I just took it as they have my documents and that they're reviewing my application or preparing it for review. We didn't hear from them for another 8 business days.
Which isn't a lot of time for, compared to a lot of people who wait for these visas, where they can take upwards of 60, 90 days.
Well, that's standard processing.
Yeah, I know. But 8 days, when you paid for priority, still feels like a long time, and every day is slow.
Yeah, and if you're following forums and whatnot and talking to people online who have also gone through this process, it's really hard to sit there and say, I applied before you, and yet you've already got a decision on yours. Because that did happen. I was very upset when I saw that some people had a decision email back in their account 3 business days later. And I'm like, what the heck? So ours finally came through on the 8th business day.
Yep.
I think it was early in the morning or mid-afternoon. You were still awake when it came in.
Yeah, it was very late my time. So it must have been...
my morning.
Yeah.
So it was very early your time when we got the email telling us that a decision had been made. And I looked at it, and it says nothing about what the decision was, whether it was accepted or denied, which is a little frustrating, but with what I've been reading online, I was expecting that. I was expecting another vague, generic email. So then the real waiting game happened, and I'm sitting at home waiting for my documents to come back. And thankfully, you could track this online through UPS, or at least in my case, it was through UPS. I tracked them and watched, how far it had made it back home. And I would say 3 days later, it made it from the UK back to my hometown. And I saw that it was out for dispatch in the morning, but it didn't even make it to my grandparents' house until evening time. You stayed up so late to be there with me on Skype and watch me open up my package.
Yeah.
I was really nervous when I got it. I was with my family so that I could feel support, and if it was denied, that they could be there to give me some sort of comfort, because if I just done this alone and it was denied, I would have been mortified. Chris is so far away, so I needed someone to be there. And I was staring at this package in front of me, and I just didn't want to open it, because if it was a refused visa, I'd rather not know than to know.
Yeah.
Until my grandmother basically yelled at me and told me to hurry up and open it already. So I opened it, and the first thing I saw on the top of my documents when I pulled them out was a letter. And from what I had read, letters often were related to a refusal. So I didn't want to look at this letter. I didn't want to look, but my passport wasn't on the top of my documents. I noticed that everything wasn't really arranged the way it was when I sent it to them. I mean, why would they put it back? But there was no passport on the top, so it was just sandwiched somewhere in there. And so finally I just grabbed the letter, because I was frustrated trying to find this passport book that's not right there in front of me. And I just skimmed over the top line, and it said that my visa had been successful. And that's when I just beamed with excitement. I felt like my heart stopped for like a second, because I was just so shocked, but also so excited in the same moment. And then I smushed all of my documents aside and pulled out my passport book, flipped through the pages, and that's where I found my vignette.
Yeah.
And I noticed that in the vignette, our intended travel date that I had put down for the beginning of April was approved. And now, mind you, this was 8 business days after late February, so this was the beginning of March. I didn't want to leave the US right away, because I still was closing up things with my business, and I wanted good time to sell my car, close down certain accounts, so I needed time. But my intended travel date was essentially accepted. They honored that in a way. So I was able to still select the date that I wanted to fly out, because they do tell you not to book your flight before going. So that evening, when I got back to my client's house to finish up with my pet sitting, I went online and purchased my one-way ticket to the UK, and that was phenomenal. And ever since then, I moved over here, closed up everything back home, and we've been living together in a close proximity relationship. It's been really great. Got my BRP card no problem after arriving here.
Yep.
Shipped my cute little dog to the UK no problem. Yeah. She seems to be fitting in really well, and we don't have to worry about this visa stuff again for another...
Just under...
2.5 years from the get-go, but we're at 2 years now that I've been here for practically 6 months. But all in all, it was a very stressful process. It took a lot of time to prepare ourselves for it, but once we were in it, it flew by so fast. It's an emotional roller coaster for sure, no matter what the outcome is, positive or negative. And, all I can say is just surround yourself with people that are there to support you, to help let you vent, to give you a secondary eye or look of eyes on your documents. Rely on your partner for whatever you can as far as support or documentation goes, and everything should work out well in the end. I mean, no one's promised anything. We had a backup plan. If our visa wasn't approved, we would have applied once more.
Yep.
And if that was refused, we were going to try and apply for visas in the US. So don't just assume that your one application is always going to make it. Have a backup plan and understand that if a refusal happens, it's generally for a valid reason most of the time. So stay strong. Try not to dive deep into this visa stuff that you're losing sleep on it. And if you are, do voice out to somebody so that they can help relieve some of that stress and comfort you. It's going to end eventually, but if it's approved, it's a really great feeling and sense of happiness.
Yeah. It is a stressful experience, especially if you think trying to gather the documents is stressful. The waiting is probably the worst part, because at that point it's just outside of your control.
It is out of your control.
And it's not until you open that package that you receive back that you really get the answer and closure that you need of, did I get my visa or not? And if you did, that's a really great moment. If you didn't, it does suck, but if you've got a backup plan, you've got a way to move forward.
Yeah.
And it won't be the end of your visa journey.
Nope. So that's our visa story, and we hope you enjoyed it. Give us a like if you thought it was a good video. Subscribe if you want to see more. And we hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.